Welcome to the first episode of the Travis on Sports podcast. My name is Travis Tyler. I'll be your host. I'm just a guy who likes talking about sports and bought a microphone and started a podcast. So I will be trying to get these episodes out to you on a weekly basis and cover the latest news and happenings around the sports world. You can also find more of my work on my blog site, which is thefootballsavant.com. And that will soon be featuring the Football Savant podcast for all you football fans out there. I'm hoping to have Facebook and Twitter pages set up for the shows soon, but for now you can find it on Spreaker and the Travis on Sports YouTube channel. And we are also hoping to be on Apple Podcast and Spotify soon, but not quite there yet. Today is Monday, August 2nd, 2021, and on today's show we'll be talking about Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, Carson Wentz and a new injury he's dealing with, the move for Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC from the Big 12 and what that means for college football, the MLB trade deadline and the impact that notable trades are having on the league. We'll also talk a little bit about the NBA draft from last Thursday and what trades were made during that time and some notable NHL free agency deals. Kumar Rocker is an MLB draft prospect who failed to sign on his team, and we'll tell you what that means. Terry Francona resigning from the Cleveland Indians. The top high school football recruit in the 2022 recruiting class has decided to skip his senior year of high school and enroll at Ohio State a year early, and he will be eligible to play this season. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And an NHL player has been accused of doing some similar things to what Pete Rose did to get banned from baseball for life. So we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, first up is Deshaun Watson, the Houston Texans. By now, pretty much everybody knows what's going on over there, or how everything started, I should say. Deshaun Watson's unhappy with not being able to have much of a say in the head coaching hire process when they hired David Culley in the offseason and demanded a trade. At that point, his trade market was probably pretty high, and his trade value was pretty high. But then some legal issues that I'm not going to get into came out, and teams started rightfully worrying about what the NFL and the Houston Police Department's investigation, what was going to come out of those. And his market value went down, and he's kind of been stuck in a situation. And even then, even when the value was high for him, the Texans were saying, we're not trading Deshaun, we're going to keep him here. He's going to be our franchise quarterback. And it seemed pretty delusional at the time because of the way Deshaun was feeling. But they also went ahead and with their first draft pick this year, they drafted Davis Mills, a quarterback from Stanford. And they didn't have a pick till the third round. But still, it's pretty telling when you pick someone at the same position as your franchise player with your very first draft selection. Now that training camps have started this week, the Texans started their camp, and Deshaun Watson showed up to camp, and GM Nick Caserio has kind of started to change his tune a little bit, if you believe what the reports are saying. But at this point, with all the legal problems, I don't think there's much of a market out there for Deshaun, and the Texans certainly wouldn't be getting equal value for giving him up. So while there are teams out there that could use his services, I think he's going to stay put with his given situation. Now, with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, he's got a little more pull, especially given what he's given to them during his, 16 years there now? I mean, he waited behind Brett Favre, and then he's just been an incredible player since then. I mean, everybody knows that. So, somewhat similar situation. He was unhappy. He's been unhappy with not having as much of a say in the direction of the franchise and the personnel that they bring in. And so he's even admitted he was contemplating playing somewhere else or even retiring. And Green Bay came to him, changed up his contract to the point where his 2023 salary is voidable, and it'd be easier for him to be traded following this season. He's tied to the Packers for this year, but if he wants out, he can be traded after this season. And then they also made the trade for Randall Cobb to please Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers wanted Randall Cobb back. Now, got to see what happens this season and where everything goes, but it's possible. Aaron Rodgers is in his last year in Green Bay. I would assume pretty much anybody in the league would be interested in taking him on, even though he's 35 years old now. And there's going to be a market if he wants a trade, and he's going to have a say where he goes, and it's just a no-win situation for the Packers right now, even though they have him in uniform this season. And just as the training camps opened up this week, Carson Wentz suffered an injury in Colts camp. Head coach Frank Reich said that the injury appears to be a foot injury that he possibly had since high school, and it just kept getting worse, and it's popped up, and now he needs surgery and will miss 5 to 12 weeks, which comes out to a maximum of 7 games that he would miss if that timeline ends up correct, which puts him back with the Colts in November after half the season's over. And you look at the Colts quarterback options beyond that, it's a very light roster. You got Jacob Eason and Sam Ehlinger, who haven't even really taken any pro snaps outside of camp. Yeah, it's not a great situation. They just signed somebody, I can't remember who it was, but it's not a great situation. And in that division, at least they can be happy with the offensive line and the defense they have, because it could be pretty easy for Tennessee until Wentz comes back, and even then, it's no guarantee that the Colts are going to be as good as they hope, and that Wentz is going to be able to return to his MVP form. And the Colts haven't had a great quarterback behind center since Andrew Luck. Yes, Phillip Rivers was there, but he was well past his prime and well past vintage Phillip Rivers by the time he got there. He was played pretty well, but he was more of a veteran leader and a lesser difference maker on the field. He did make a difference, but not as much as as Peyton Manning had, as Andrew Luck had. And you can't expect that from anybody on this roster this year, honestly. Now we come to the college football stuff. The Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners have officially accepted an invitation to join the SEC starting with the 2025 college football season, which is when their contract with the Big 12 runs up till. They could look at legal avenues to get out of that and join sooner, but that's a long process, and they're going to have to figure that out. But what it really does for college football is bring out this idea of super conferences forming across the country, and it really goes in with the third-party report that came out with the NCAA investigation that recommended drastic reform within the NCAA as an organization. And this seems like the start of it in college football. The Big 12 accused ESPN of pushing an agenda to basically sell away all its teams to other conferences. But, if you look at the rest of the Big 12, they could easily pursue other teams to join that conference, but they're not going to bring in the marketing and the brand value and the brand equity and the advertising and the followings that Texas and Oklahoma have. I laugh when people point out Notre Dame, because Notre Dame's doing better than most conferences on its own. You look at that contract and the Golden Dome helmet, everybody knows it's Notre Dame. And, the TV deals aren't going anywhere, and still they haven't really lost much on recruiting if they have, especially with Brian Kelly there. He's been doing a pretty good job with them. So the notion that Notre Dame, just because they were in the ACC technically last year join a conference. They're doing fine enough on their own. They won't be joining the Big 12. They won't be joining the Big 10. I don't think you'll be seeing them join anything. I can see the Big 10, or not the Big 10, excuse me, the Big 12 going for like a Boise State or the all the American teams like Cincinnati and SMU and Houston, that kind of thing. But nothing's going to bring them back to, as I don't want to say as relevant, but I mean there's not really a better term, as relevant as they were and have been with Oklahoma and Texas. Now the MLB trade deadline was nuts this year. I don't think we've ever seen activity at that level. I mean, maybe as much activity during the last 3-hour window or whatever that they usually have, but this year it was full on throughout the entire week, maybe even before that. And I mean, you look at the NL West and the AL East, teams were buying like crazy, trying to keep up with each other, and it was fun to see. Keep trying to analyze everything, but you can't help but keep coming back to the Dodgers. They have to win the games. When fully healthy, they have 8 All-Stars in their starting lineup. They have a starting pitching rotation that, again, when healthy, includes Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Julio Urias, and David Price, plus Danny Duffy and Tony Gonsolin added to that bullpen with Joe Kelly, Kenley Jansen, Blake Treinen. I mean, it's a very, very difficult roster to stop. The Padres are going to be trying to get that. Looking at their lineup, I don't see enough offensive production, especially with Tatis out. I don't see a ton of offense from that lineup. Cronenworth's had a nice year. Hosmer's been all right. Machado and Pham and Grisham, I guess. Will Myers has power. Profar's got speed, but I don't see that quite competing. I mean, and they all got to catch up with the Giants too. So that's going to be difficult. I mean, Chris Bryant's playing really well now. They got that trade. And speaking of Chris Bryant, the Cubs and Nationals just decided to sell everything off, which probably the right move this time around. But you got Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and Javi Baez all leaving the Cubs at the same time. A little heartbreaking after that. Worked so hard to get that championship. And they all homered in their debuts, which was crazy to watch. And then Kyle Schwarber, who, he's not still there, but he was a huge part of what they were doing, a huge part of that young core that went to the World Series. He gets traded again from the Nationals to Boston, and that AL East race is just heating up real quick too, because you got the Yankees going after their left-handed power hitters and Gallo and Rizzo, and they got a lot of flexibility in their lineups now, and you got those left-handed bats hitting that right field in that Yankee Stadium and everything. You got a lot of power, a lot of homers in that lineup now. I don't love their pitching rotation outside of Garrett Cole. That could hold them back. Their hitters don't have great averages this year, but there's some reputations in there, like there always have been with the Yankees, and you're just going to have to pick your poison which one of them gets to beat you if they're all on fire at the same time. And then the Red Sox get Schwarber, like I was talking about. They'll have to figure out where they're going to play him on defense. I mean, he could easily DH, but they also have J.D. Martinez there. But that left-handed bat into that